Thank you very much. I appreciate your kind introductory words for me. So once again, let me thank DI, especially Dr. Antoinette Danker for inviting me to this all-important lecture. Today being the Founders Day, I think it's a privilege that you have extended to me, and I am really grateful for that. Let me start on all the protocols, especially extending my greetings to the Right Honorable former MP, Professor. Prof, my greetings to you. I'm happy to see you looking very well. And thank you for making time to attend to this presentation. Right, so my presentation, I will, as has been given to me, to talk on center-right ideology and economic policy of COVID-19 that we will need. So if the host can extend the host to me, I will just share a bit of my screen so that at least you can follow the presentation.
Noted, Prof. Please grant him hosting rights. Prof, you are good. Please share your screen.
Thank you.
As Prof gets ready to share his screen, kindly let us know if you're having challenges hearing. You can just type something in the chat box. Let us know if you're having any challenges hearing or seeing anything that is going on here. You can also put in your comments in the chat box as Prof presents. We'll read them after the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Please, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so my presentation is going to be presented in this key outline. First of all, I'm just going to look at the center-right from the perspective of an economist. What do we understand by center-right ideology? Try to bring some understanding to this center-right movement. And then the paradigm shifts in ideology of development, the history of mankind, the shift in ideology from time immemorial till now. And then Ghana's experience of this ideology, as well as the imperatives for economic recovery after the post-COVID-19 pandemic. So essentially, these are the outline for my presentation, but feel free to ask questions if you have any thing not been too clear to you. I'll be happy to respond. Okay, so just to start on what is center-right ideology? This often referred to as also as moderate right politics. And the center-right often lean to the right of the political spectrum. And I'm sure you know the spectrum where the left is largely on the more of centralized form of governance, the radical socialist at the far end or the far left. And then we have the right wing or the far right, more of nationalists or nationalism ideologies. And then the center, which focuses on liberalism, largely liberal conservatism. And the liberal conservatism actually is a move away from the nobility of and the mercantilism ideas towards more of a class or upper class or the capitalism ideology, where free enterprise and the market system is the center of economic decision making. So the issue of who takes decision, what to produce, as we call in economy, how to produce, and to whom to produce to. That decision in the liberal environment is made by the individual. It is often determined by the markets. The market-driven kind of policy would determine allocation of resources, who get what, how that resources are produced or distributed, and who actually receive is entirely the making of the market. The market actually decide. So we have that, and this right-wing or moderate right politics or the center-right politics is actually driven largely by economic liberalism, as I've said. And in politics, as Prof. Okay is here, they across the world, countries or political parties that align to this moderate right politics are what we see in the UK, the Conservative Party, and then we see within the US, we have the Republic, and then the Canadian Conservatives Party as well. We have the Liberal Party of Australia also leaning to the center largely. Now then, the economic liberalism, what are the key features of this economic liberalism that we're talking about? They normally subscribe to free markets, as I've mentioned earlier. And the free market is where the market determines prices, it determines allocation of resources. It also leans to what we call private ownership of capital assets, the property owning form of democracy, where individual or wealth creation is the center of economic decision, empowering individuals to be able to own wealth. It's a key feature of the center-right economic liberalism. And they also subscribe to certain key macroeconomic positions, like restraining fiscal policy and looking more of balancing budget. And so for them, fiscal constraint or ensuring fiscal consolidation, that is ensuring that you spend what you have, not recording too large fiscal deficits, is a key feature of the center-right. In that case, they also tilt towards low taxes. The lower taxes, the idea behind their preference for low taxes and often for the upper class is that if you reduce taxes for the upper class, which will often has the wealth to invest, you increase their ability and their ability to invest. You actually increase their disposable income, individuals and firms with lower taxes, and therefore you give them the ability to invest, to employ more people, especially the downtrodden or the marginalized. So it is better because it is not too good to thinly distribute wealth. It is better wealth is concentrated on the well-to-do who would have the ability to invest in capital that can really be utilized in mass production. In so doing, they are able to produce many more people, employ many more people, and bring about economic, higher economic well-being and wealth creation. So they actually lean towards tax cuts. They lean towards reduced government spending, and therefore minimize debt. And so their debt levels are often quite low. They also tilt towards free trade, the laissez-faire. Trade is beneficial to the economy, and so they're against trade depression or protectionism, and allow trade deregulations, liberalization, ensuring low taxes, low tariffs, and what have you, so that in the end, the economic agent will benefit. So they also will tilt towards deregulation of the economy, largely deregulation of our financial system. Interest rates has to be determined not by the state, but by the interplay of the market. Looking at price, decontrol prices has to be determined by the interplay of the market. They tilt towards privatization, reducing the role of the states and ensuring that the private sector take charge in what to produce, how to produce, and whom to produce. The essence of all this policy, as Adam Smith often emphasized, is that it brings about efficiency in production. It leads to effective and efficient allocation of resources, and therefore leads to higher and more economic gains. So over the years, this has been the features of economic liberalism, or the modern center-right movement. Now, but looking back, you realize that this ideology has not prevailed over a period of time. There have been paradigm shifts in terms of some of these market-driven or market mechanism policies. If you go back to the era of the First World War, where the market actually lead in terms of allocation of resources, the free enterprise regime. Now, that was really good. The market was, the economies were booming until 1927, 1928, when there was crisis, and that crisis led to what became known as the Great Depression. The Great Depression ensuring that there was demand deficiency, people income fell drastically. The Wall Street financial system crashed. We have people losing jobs and incomes, and so they were not able to buy goods and services. That characterized the Great Depression. In fact, that actually led to the Second World War largely. During that time emerged the state interventionist viewpoint, when we have the Maynard Keynes coming out with the direct government intervention in order to resuscitate the economy. Because in his view, the economy has fallen so much that if you leave the economy to the market, it's going to play at the suboptimal level, at the level that will never be able to bring the economy back to its pre-crisis era. The only way to revive the economy is for the state to intervene. The state intervention will mean that the state would have to spend more, invest, and create jobs. By so doing, it will give more money to the people. People will be able to save, investment would increase, wealth would increase, and GDP will grow, and then economy will recover. So the emphasis then was the state's intervention. And at that time was also when the USSR, Soviet Union, with more socialist and communist ideas, which is largely in line with the Keynesian theory of state intervention. So the radical movement then came in, more populism, nationalism movement became the order of the day, the new economic order. then push away the laissez-faire economies, that is the market-driven form of economy. And so what to produce, how to produce, who to get what was then being determined largely by the states. So like in Ghana, that was also when we gained our independence, and Osajifo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah came in, and we also then took advantage of the moment and moved towards the left, more radical, centralized plan kind of economic decision making. So that became the order of the day at the time, around 1950s, 60s, and 70s. So we have the state owning enterprises springing up. The ownership structure of many banks changed for the state owned. And then we have several other state interventions in the economy. So everything was largely being driven by the states at that time. And that is to the left, or a center left economic policy, the planned system, or the more communist kind of socialist form of economic system. So in the process, the socialist movement tried to take control over economic agents, including the banking system, the ownership, directing credits, ensuring that interest rates were capped, were very low, so that the state can borrow more and invest in critical infrastructure, create jobs for the people, and all of that. But not too long after that, it became evident that the state was failing in many fronts. There was the banking system, or the financial system, was almost on the verge of collapsing because of the low interest rates and the high inflation, which actually ensured that real interest rate was almost negative, culminating into more money leaving the shores of the country. We have a situation where government ownership of businesses led to collapse of many, many businesses. So in the end, we had very deteriorating economic performance. We have credits quality reducing, and we have the economy being captured by rent-seeking individuals, the elites taking over the economy, and government recording high budget deficits, the public sector exhibiting high inefficiencies and low productivity. And then also we have a situation of low investment in infrastructure. So that kind of system was then being described as a repressive economic policy, because it was the policies that was not liberating the individual's potential to be able to come out and partake in the economic development process. So certain economists at the time, Mackinnon and Shaw liberalization hypothesis, described such an economy or such ideology as repressive policies at the time, because almost everything getting to the end of 1970s, almost all economies that went into the central left or became more socialist saw their economy tumbling in the process, deteriorating fiscal balances, higher tendency to borrow, creating large fiscal deficit and debt situations, and so on. So then came the neoliberal renaissance. Then the economy, those neoliberals, that is the ideology that is more tilted to the right or to the center, began to emerge and pointing holes to the state interventions in economic management. And this was largely led by the monetarists, the school of thought that was led by Milton Friedman at the time. And their view was to reject the Keynesians' view of state interventions in managing or taking decisions for the economy. In their view, the state has no more role to play in economic development than to allow the markets to determine the allocation of resources, money to play a critical role in reducing inflation instead of the state's intervention, reducing aggregate demand in that regard. And so the neoliberals emerged to actually take over the economic management. And this neoliberals was actually brought into by the Bretton Woods institutions at the time. So the Bretton Woods institution then came in at the latter part of 1970s, based on what also was known as the Washington Consensus. And the Washington Consensus was largely the neoliberal or the neoliberal form of economic management that is going back to the pre-Second World Era economic management policies. And that actually started giving more credence to fiscal discipline, redirection of public expenditure, priorities towards high economic return fields, improved income distribution, tax reforms, interest rate liberalization, competitive exchange rate, trade liberalization, privatization, deregulation, securing property rights. So largely the economy or the economic policy management coming back to the central center-right form of policy. And that underpinned the structural adjustment program that Ghana also brought into it in 1983. So the structural adjustment program was largely market-driven policy, far cry from the center-left form of policy where there was huge state influence in economic management. So we saw issues like price stability, fiscal probity, tax increase, or expenditure cuts, removal of active state intervention for private sector, and a host of these policies that we are all quite aware of. So in Ghana, we then launched into the economic recovery program, which was largely market-driven to correct the imbalances, the exchange rate, over-bloating, trade barriers, and tighten monetary policy, and all of that. The result was good. By 1988-89, many of the negative macroeconomic indicators, indicators that were heading in the wrong direction, began to turn into very positive direction, where we started recording positive economic growth. Around 1988, recording a growth of about 5% thereabout. And then we saw inflation falling to a single digit, investment increasing. So the center-right policies really brought some good results to the economy. But there was also some flip side to these policies, market-driven policies, that was spearheaded by the Bretton Woods institution. So by the end of 1990s, 91, it became clear that the over-concentration on the markets really has not helped developing countries. Having one-size-fits-all form of policies has really worsened developing countries like Ghana's situation, in the sense that during that time, although we had very good macroeconomic performance, at the social side of the economy was down, was really in jeopardy. We have poverty increasing in the process. We have widened inequality, and education, really underperforming, healthcare, and all those social policies. Because the thing about the market is that the market will not look at the social side, and often may require some kind of government intervention to be able to correct what we call the market failure. So there was huge market failure that came, and that resulted in the Bretton Woods institution being criticized that they were actually imposing kind of one-size-fits-all without looking at the local context. Okay, what really worked for developing countries. So they were criticized. So if you remember, then the programs of these Bretton Woods institutions then begin to change to a large extent, because the increase in equality and all of that clearly showed that these market-driven policies had really not worked. So when in 2000, 2001, when President Kufuor took over, you realized that that was the time when this idea of it's not only, the emphasis should not only be on economic growth, but also should be on having inclusive pro-growth policies, okay? Pro-poor kind of policies, in a sense that the policy document that the Kufuor government actually adopted was what we call the Poverty Reduction Growth Facility, if you remember. So the Poverty Reduction Growth Facility actually tend to have a mixed form of policy combining the market system, which focuses more on the growth levers of the economy, and then the social side, which then tend to lead to reducing inequalities and poverty in the process. So in essence, what this tells us is that no one single ideology has prevailed in the history of mankind. We have had a shift paradigms from the market-driven to the socialist, to the communist, and all of that, so that no one decision-making model, in essence, that has prevailed. That tells us that what really matters for any economic system in recent times is the system that really focuses on changing values, institutions to reshape the nature, scope, and means of exercising authority. In essence, for the practical formulation of policy, the relevant or the interesting question is not the a priori choice between the classicals or the liberal or the state intervention or the Keynesian model, but rather the perpetually topical one is what is the current state of the economy like, and which model is most applicable to it. So there is rarely a sure answer, no sure answer to that question. Consequently, the judgment on this question and the formulation of the proper policy are an art and not a science. There's no specific scientific way of managing economy. It's a marriage of the two ideologies. So, given this background, then we look at what then will be required for the current situation with the COVID situation. So if you will realize that although the MPP is very much to the center, the neoliberal form of governance, the President Kufuor government was, in essence, also a little bit more embracing pro-poor form of policies, more of inclusive form of policy by bringing in more social safety net form of policy, the free senior high, the capitation grant, the LEAP, livelihood empowerment against poverty, that tend to focus on the vulnerable people, the mass transportation, and a host of the NHIS. All of these are broad-based policies that are geared towards inclusiveness and empowering the vulnerables to be part of the economic growth process. So you can clearly see that there is some form of paradigm shift, not becoming too fixated on the center, but also allowing a human-centered form of policy. So with the COVID, so the COVID can be likened to the period of the Great Depression, when the economy was brought to its knees, or the most recent Great Recession in 1986-87, when there was the global financial crisis. In that kind of situation, do you stick to ideology? No. In that kind of situation, there is no universal economic cure or ideology that can resuscitate the economy. Policy responses to such a situation, especially to the COVID pandemic, has as has been seen, vary from country to country in line with different health, economic, and political circumstances that often will drive the policy response in that regard. So what government has done is to look at these two fronts. There is no easy fix to making sure that the economy recovers. With the COVID, as we all saw, it actually brought the economy to its knees. There was disruption in production. There was disruption in the value chain of supply value chain. There was disruption in the social sectors, health, education, and everything. And so in that sense, you cannot leave the economic management to the market. You need some form of human-centered policies to be able to bring about recovery and to be able to make sure that there's enough social safety net to protect the people. So what is needed? What is needed will be in this situation is going to be driven by three key interlocking situation, okay? A changing situation that really would underpin any economic management or policies that can quicken our recovery from this pandemic. Far away from ideology, the imperative for this economy to be able to recover quickly, as I've outlined, are based on three key things: will be higher degree of technological advancement, structural economic transformation, and social dynamism. But let's also be mindful that there's not going to be any easy fix. The rebuilding or resetting or reshaping this economy will definitely require patience, persistence, and an openness to break from the past practice or ideology and embrace blended form of economic management that look at both the economy, technology, and social diversity. They are key. So in essence, what then, to take these three quickly and to end my lecture, will be the three imperatives or the levers, the degree of technology advancement. Given what has happened with COVID, given that the COVID disrupted the supply chain and everything else, there's a need for what we call the disruptive creativity, okay? The disruptive creativity, which is largely underpinned by technology, okay? To be the key enabler for our economic recovery. The economy has to ensure that we invest heavily in innovation, okay? Fourth industrial revolution, that is largely driven by ICT, technology, engineering, mathematics, research and development, will be the key driver for economic growth. That has to be underpinned by this economic recovery. And therefore, I'm happy that this government or the MPP government has spent much more resources in trying to digitize the economy, to create the smart cities that we need. Because for this, the response for the recovery is not about the bigness of the government, but it's about a smart government. Government's ability to leverage technology to ensure low costs of service delivery, low cost transactions, and to facilitate resource allocation will be key to the recovery. We need to empower the youth to be able to digitize and to create employment for the youth through digitization and what have you. And then the economic transformation. What is it that we need at this time? We have seen policies by government, which in my view, they are good. We cannot at this time be stuck to ideology. Like I mentioned earlier, we need to have several economic policies that will respond to the situation. Now, we have seen some relative macroeconomic stability through some prudent fiscal management. We have seen interest rates coming down. We have seen inflation coming down. These are good policies, but we are witnessing a situation where debt is increasing. Now, the debt increasing is what I would say there is a missing link here. The missing link is because, I mean, as MPP, which really prides itself as a free enterprise form of economic management, should often or be looking towards more of reduced tax, as I've said, tax reduction, as the MPP manifesto mentioned, moving away from taxation to production, which is the right thing, okay? Shifting away from nuisance taxes and all of those things. But as soon as you begin to move to more social, inclusive form of policy, as we are seeing now, with more social inclusive policies being rolled out by the day, with the free senior high school and all of that, and the budget being very heavy on social spending, then there are two things. You could no longer continue to have low taxes. If you do, then the only way out for you to continue to borrow, okay? So we need to be able to create the right balance. That now that we are going very heavy on social policy, we need to ensure that we have a very effective tax system, tax mobilization that is more progressive, that really increases government revenue, for government to continue to be able to pursue much more of these social policies. Otherwise, the debt levels are going to go up, given the fact that our tax to GDP remains very low. We have to be much more innovative in that regard. We are currently in some form of debt distress. We cannot run away from that. But it is also the case that three key issues have happened that has exacerbated this situation, with the energy crisis that resulted in contingent liabilities payments, and then with the banking crisis that resulted in the bailouts and the payouts to depositors, and then with the COVID. So my advice to government is that, given that debt levels continue to rise, I think that government should lean more towards debt relief at this time, and more traditional form of debts, other than still concentrated on the commercial debts. It is key to reduce the interest payment that is currently swallowing the government's revenue. Another imperative that will be needed for speedy recovery and resetting this economy will be greater efficiency in the use of all public resources, and more professional and transparent approach to public investments, okay? Finding a way of ensuring effective public financial management system, reducing grafts in public investments and services. It is key to blocking the loopholes so that there is more value for money in the process. Improve public infrastructure. It's also critical for us to be able to speedily recover from this pandemic, which is still not over yet. Government must find the resources to be able to invest in competitive infrastructure, because that will be the key driver for growth. The road network, we need to focus more on building more roads, because it's a catalyst to development. We have to find the resources, leveraging our natural resources, moving into PPP arrangement in order to be able to invest. So the idea of the Sino-Hydro form of investment, for me, is the way to go in this era, leveraging our resources that we don't have the capital to exploit. We need to be more innovative in bringing in foreign capital at this time. Robust financial system or sector, of course, is key. Encouraging private savings and foreign private investment is also key, given the fact that we have very low saving behavior, and so we have high financial gap or investment gap. We definitely need foreign private investments to come in. And that will mean that government must continually focus on creating that competitive environment to be able to attract more foreign investment, because we need this for the critical mass of investment to create jobs. Government alone cannot create jobs. It has been very clear that government cannot do it. And therefore, government has to create that enabling environment to unleash potential of the private sector to lead. The CARE program, one of the things that we also would need will be a more supportive private sector environment for domestic business and the support of small-scale enterprises and entrepreneurship, which I think the CARE program is seeking largely to support. And that really is good. What we are not too clear about is the financing regime for the Ghana CARE program, but it is an initiative that really, if it's well implemented, is going to enhance and increase the productive capacity of this economy. That we need that. We need that because once you are able to increase productive capacity of the economy, you are able to increase your
Hello, Prof. Hello, Prof.
Yeah, so I'm almost finishing. So I'll finish.
Prof.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I'll finish very soon. Just 5 minutes, I'll be done. So export promotion would mean that we definitely would have to increase the productive capacity of this economy in order to be able to take advantage of the after that guarantees a much bigger African market for us, creating that competitiveness, and at the same time supporting import substitution form of industrialization, because over the years we tended to depend so much on import. The time has come that if we want to reset and diversify the economy, we need to support businesses and manufacturers that actually are geared towards import substitution. And as I mentioned, building technological capacities key. The third and the last imperative is the social dynamism. And this will mean that rapid growth should not leave no one behind. For this economy to be able to ensure sustainable development, whatever policies that we are pursuing should ensure participatory, inclusive, broad-based form of economic growth. And that would mean that focusing more on broad-based education, like what the government is doing with the free senior high school education, ensuring broad access to high quality healthcare is also key, and skills training is paramount. And more importantly, to have policies that are geared toward the vulnerable. What that means that we need to upscale the social protection policies that we have, especially the LEAP program, the livelihood, the LIPW, Labor Intensive Public Works program, the NHIS, and a lot of those policies are needed, particularly in the post-COVID era, to create the necessary safety net and to ensure that we have broad-based form of economic growth that reduces poverty and inequality. So in conclusion, what I would say is that there's no one-size-fits-all form of policy. It requires policy that embraces advancement in technology, economic transformation, and social dynamism to ensure inclusive growth. Any transformation is not going to be easy fix. It will require patience, it will require persistence, and it will require collective efforts by all in that regard. So let me leave you with this quote from Charles Darwin, which says that it is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. Therefore, we have to be responsive to change in this era of post-economic COVID period. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Prof. Indeed, is the ones that are responsive to change that will survive and recover from a crisis. Thank you so much. Prof is an academic through and through. Is giving us a historical overview of how ideologies have affected the formulation of policies over time. And he's also given us some hints or some suggestions on how we are going to recover as a country from the challenges that COVID has, and it's still raising or impeding on us. Thank you so much, Prof. I have taken, it's been an insightful lecture. I have taken so much, but I don't want to repeat all that he has said, but just to remind us that if we will recover from this crisis, there are three key things that he's suggesting: higher degrees of technological advancement, economic and structural transformation, and social dynamism, leaving no one behind. He's also advising or cautioning that this will take a lot of patience and persistence on our part as a people. Thank you, Prof. These nuggets have been well taken. At this point, we are going to allow for some questions, but we'll ask you to leave your questions in the comment box. So we'll read it out and give Prof a chance to respond. We don't have much time, so we are just going to do one round of questioning. And we are also asking that if you have any contribution or comments, leave them in the chat box. If time allows us, we are going to read them out. So kindly send in your questions and we will send it to them. We will read it out and Prof will respond to them. Before that, I would also like to say that we are live on Asasi Radio. We are live on Facebook Live, Asasi Radio Facebook Live, and we're also live on Facebook, the DI, Dankwa Institute Facebook. So join us. We are happy to have you. Keep your questions and your comments coming and we'll read them out. So we have a question already from Issa Imoro. Prof, thanks for this exciting lecture. You spoke about creating a balance between taxes and the pro-social policies that this government has been implementing. Do you think that digitalization agenda by the government will be helpful in generating revenue for government and blocking linkages in revenue collection? Thank you, Issa Imoro. So, Prof.
Okay, thank you very much, Issa. I think that was a very good question. Yes, absolutely. I think that that is the way to go because one of the challenges with tax collection has always been inefficiencies in tax collection, high cost of collection, and then compliance issue. The fact that many more people evade and avoid taxes, the human factor that actually tend to corrupt the system. And so digitalization would, one of the things that digitalization will do is to first to take away the human intermediaries that often tend to corrupt the system, and also to reduce the collection costs in that regard. It will also encourage compliance to a large extent, because if the compliance cost is lowered, you feel much more easy to pay your taxes. So bringing in technology really, for me at this point, particularly as we are talking about broadening the tax net to the informal sector that really contribute more than 80% to our GDP, is the way to go, because the informal sector is so thinly and widely spread that it's always difficult for the tax collectors to reach out to every one of them. The cost of collection is high. So if you can deploy technology whereby it's so easy for anybody, for example, to use his or her mobile money to pay 1 cedi or 2 cedi, it is easy. And so I think that technology is the way to go in trying to increase resource mobilization and tax yield. And I believe that the government, as we have seen, is on the right path for that kind of policy of digitalization. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. I think our next question had to do with tax mobilization, and Prof has hinted on that. The person is asking how government is going to sustain tax mobilization, considering that our revenue mobilization has been mainly targeted towards the formal sector without paying much attention to the people in the informal sector. And so I think Prof has hinted at that. Prof, if you want to say something more about that, is asking how we can sustain revenue or tax mobilization. post-COVID?
Yes, I think it's crucial that we sustain that. Like I mentioned in my lecture, Ghana tax to GDP is one of the lowest. I mean, if you look at even Africa, the West Africa, the average is around 17.5%. We are doing just about 12%. So it means that there's a huge tax gap that has to be closed. So we have to do everything possible, be more innovative, more smart in ensuring that every single person that is able and it pays at least his or her due for a tax system. What our tax managers should be mindful of is a shift away from a regressive tax system, over focusing on indirect taxes like VAT and imposing more taxes on petroleum and others, to more progressive form of taxation. Okay, targeting the well-to-do, the upper class, businesses and others. For me, it is much more redistributive in a sense that if you focus more on indirect taxes, which is so easy to do, you create more gulf in distribution of income, because the impact is much more felt on the poor than on the rich. So in trying to reform our tax system and increase compliance, my advice to government is to gradually shift away from more regressive, more indirect form of taxes, consumption taxes, to more of income form of taxes, where within the informal sector, anybody contributing small, at least pay something little from income, with the businesses, multinationals being able to pay their due, the financial system, the mineral, energy, all of them paying, and targeting the upper class that are making so much. In the end, the tax become more redistributive and also reduces the gap and become more sustainable in the process. So,
thank you very much, Prof. Thank you. Dr. Jodumfe is a senior research fellow at the Center for Social Policy Studies. He wants to make a quick
thank you.
2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Professor Basarisi, for very insightful presentation. I really love it. Prof, I have an issue here at hand. I have been looking around since the word experience what we are currently going through. And if you look back to the history, I think the worst of this happened in the 1930s. And you really mentioned it. I'm talking about the Great Depression. And when it happened, when the classicals were thinking of the fact that the economy should be allowed to work, since we should go about doing our normal things, and with the hope that in future, as it were, the market will clear for everything to end. It never did. It never did until somebody very radical by the name John Maynard Keynes, and in my opinion, is the best economist ever lived, who came to the scene and was so aggressive in his book titled The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, that was published in 1936, which eventually saved the world. He expanded on the concept of liquidity preferences and made a very good suggestion to him at the time. Anytime an economy experiences recessions and depressions, individuals and businesses do not usually have the resources for creating immediate results through consumer spending or business investment. And as for that matter, he said it is only government that could salvage the situation in such crisis through either monetary or fiscal policies. I don't think things have changed so much. His radical stance, can we go there? For example, if you come to Ghana, I don't want to say we should go to the Euro market to procure Euro bonds and those things. I don't want to go that way. But government spending must go up in order to get us where we want to go. And I look at Bank of Ghana. Bank of Ghana is currently having $11 billion US as reserves. And this is the highest we have had since 1957. What are we doing with this money, Prof? Isn't it that we can borrow? The central government can borrow about 3-4 billion and say, I'm going to use this only for roads. Fortunately for us, agricultural sector is doing so well that when government spends so much, inflation wouldn't be much of a problem. I want to suggest that we look at that. If we could go for $4 billion, $5 billion from Bank of Ghana and constantly use it only on road. You know, we have quite a huge problem with roads in Ghana. Concentrate that money on road construction, for example, and that in effect will through various transmission mechanism help revive this economy. What's your take on this, Prof?
Was that a question? Dr. Adonfe? Okay, so before Prof comes in to respond to Dr. Adonfe, can I just, there's a quick question, can I add that one? Prof, great conversation around center-right ideology. My question is, what kind of ideology would be more sustainable for this decade? And the person, this from Palgrave, Boachi Damkwa, he's asking that from 2021 to 2030, what kind of ideology do you think will be sustainable for us? So Prof, could you add that to Dr. Adonfe's question, and then we'll read a few Facebook comments and wrap up. We already run out of time.
All right, thank you, Dr. George Domfe, and then Mr. Boachi Damkwa, the director of Institute. Anyway, so these are very useful questions. I mean, I think I can tie the two in, and I will say that the response to this shock to the economy is not really about ideology. It is not business as usual kind of economic response. It's economic business as usual will not be an option in that regard. Of course, if I should start from Dr. Domfe's issue of state interventionism from Keynes in 1930s, that obviously is needed. In a situation where you have economic shock, often efficiency, there's often huge gap in your growth. The way out is for government expenditure, okay? And the role of the states is always very important in matters like this, because the state is the chief architect and the designer of economic infrastructure. Without the states, the markets will never be able to allocate resources in a way that is broad-based. So in such a situation, you need the states to intervene largely to be able to stimulate the economy. Now, the key issue is that can the states do it alone? No. States cannot also do it alone. There's no way that the state alone can allocate resources and ensure speedy recovery by just spending and spending and spending. You will need the partnership of the private sector. So it is a partnership that will be a game changer. You need the private sector, you need the market to be able to also ensure efficiency of allocation resources. So there's no one either or kind of situation where you either go far right or far left, where the state or where you allowing them. You need a blend, a mixed form of economic system at this moment, where the state plays a critical role. The state has to be able to invest. So for me, now the issue of fiscal deficit that we are talking about, I don't think it's an issue, because the situation where we find ourselves requires that the state spends more, as Dr. Domfe mentioned. We need the state to spend to be able to ensure that the economy recovers. We need the central bank to pursue more accommodative, more expansionary monetary policy, because the central bank is also a key player in this process, as the monetarist viewpoint suggests. The central bank, as has been suggested, can also help partner with government to ensure that certain key productive sectors of economy receive enough investment, like the roads. Now, often the argument has been that the central bank intervention have to be well crafted in a way that will not be inflationary, right? Because central bank often comes in by, either purchasing government instrument or printing money and that kind of thing. And if you don't take care, it is going to result in high inflation. But we are in a situation where the economy is already below its optimal level, okay? It's below the full employment level. There's a huge output gap in that regard. So intervention at this level may not necessarily be inflationary. So we require the central bank to continue to support government by pursuing policies that will reduce interest rates. If interest rates are reduced, it helps government and the economy in two fronts. One, currently we have a situation where interest payment has become an overhang on government, which is taking more than 60% of tax revenue. A way to reduce that is for interest rate to reduce the burden on government interest payments. Two, once interest rates reduce, it also allows the private sector to partake in the growth process. Private sector has access to affordable credit, and the investments is critical at this stage from the private sector to quicken recovery. And the only way out is for private sector to get access to capital and be able to invest. So we need interest rate to come down, and that can be a deliberate policy on the part of central bank, particularly at a time where around us, most advanced countries have very low interest rates. It is a time that the central bank has to seize the opportunity to reduce or to pursue policies that will reduce interest rates.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Palgrave, just a quick one that I talk about. So which economic policy will be important?
Ideology.
Ideologies, yeah. Yes, like I mentioned, I think there is not going to be any one decision model or ideology that will make the trick. It is going to be a mixture of the two. The state is important, the market is important, and the time has come for any response. Both ideologies will be very important. You need the state's interventionism, you need the broad-based social policies to support the public, to support people, the vulnerables in the society. You need to support the market. State has to create the enabling environment to unleash the potential of the private sector, because it's the private sector that will ensure efficiency. It is the private sector that will create jobs for the people. It is the private sector that will lead, that will facilitate growth and ensure more sustainable development. So a blend of the two is key. So any policy should be able to embrace both right and left at this particular moment of the pandemic in order to prevail, in order to ensure speedy recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. There are more questions coming in, but time will not allow us to take all of that. There's a hand up. I'll give an opportunity to one more person to make a comment or a question. Mr. Jojo Tibudakun wants to ask a question. Your hand is up. Please ask your question in 2 minutes. Thank you. Please, Mr. Tibudakun, please unmute yourself and then, yeah.
Oh, okay. That was a nice presentation. I think everything has been covered. I actually know I wasn't going to ask a question. I was going to bring in a comment. Everything that's been said is already going on. It's happening in the US, it's happening in UK, and it's happening in Europe. They're already doing exactly what we're discussing here. If you look at the US now, they have a big bill working on infrastructure. There's a huge money they've devoted that they're debating on now. So I think we just have to get our legislators to also do the same thing. That's it. Just a comment.
Thank you. And thank you for keeping it brief. Thank you.
Okay.
As I mentioned, we have more questions coming in. but time would not allow us. That is to say that we have to do this more often. So it will be at the next lecture, there will be an opportunity for us to continue the discussion. So all we are saying is that do not let the conversation end today. Let's keep the conversation going, and then let's meet at the next lecture and keep deliberating. At this point, I'd like to thank Prof, and I'd like to thank all those who have joined us from on Facebook. We're also on home radio in WA. And then I want to hand over to the Executive Director to give her closing remarks. Once again, my name is Ernestina Denchi. Thank you so much for staying with me. Executive Director, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Denchi. Thank you very much, Prof. That was an amazing presentation. I have pages and pages of summary for my closing remarks, but as Dr. Denchi has just pointed, time is fast spent. But Prof, I want to thank you very much. The whole aim of this lecture series is to shed more light on the Dankwa Dombowuzia tradition, the ideologies, and how it has evolved and the policies that we are seeing with the current administration. And Prof, thank you very much. You shed a lot of light on it. I would encourage especially our youth and our upcoming generation to pay close attention to these lectures as they come out, because this is what is going to empower you and give you more vision and understanding of the policies we are pursuing and the ideologies behind our founders. In fact, today has been very, very enlightening, even for myself as a strong advocate of the Dankwa Dombowuzia tradition. Prof's very deep explanation of what is happening, the evolution, the transformation, what we have gone through. He reminded us especially that there is no easy fix. And I think we should color that in red for our youth today and for our impatient generation who want everything to happen overnight. It is not an immediate thing, and there's no one cap fits all. But he goes ahead to emphasize that we are doing well despite all the hindrances. There's positivity. Let's transform and put this positive energy into what we want to happen in our country. We should embrace technology. His emphasis on technology means that we should also take our education seriously. Science, STEM, he makes that emphasis on it. Research and development is very important. And we see all of this in the current new patriotic party's government, like in the administration that says, hey, I'm pushing digitization ahead of everything. The government has the ability and is doing it, is leveraging on technology. And this is key for us, and we should be very excited about it. We want to empower our youth through digitization, and we want economic transformation. I'm especially excited about how he goes to talk about this 10 policy imperative. Yeah. There are things that we see happening, but we have to see it more clearly. We have to understand it. And that's why we're encouraging more people to log on and to attend these lectures, because that is how you get a clearer light of what we are seeing today. He also points that the pandemic is not over. So there's no one cap fits all, which means we don't know what will happen in the next 2, 3, 4 months. So change is very dynamic. Things will have to change as time goes on. And that is what this government is good at doing. And therefore we must look at it. I mean, I like his emphasis also on social dynamism. Don't leave anyone behind. Yeah. So we recognize the fact that policies will not be such that everybody will be, brought along. So at the same time, when he talks about, the structure adjustment time, when those things were not as inclusive as they should have been. So we learn, we go back, we learn from what didn't work, and then we try to incorporate it going forward. And that I think is very key for us. But I want to end with this famous quote from J.D. Dankwa. He says, forget not your right, but don't boast with your right. Boast not with them. Think more of duties that must be achieved. What is your duty as a Ghanaian? Do you go to work in the morning and close before midday? Do you spend your hours on Facebook and internet and social media without doing what you have to do as a Ghanaian? Right. And then you finish and you take a step back and you are the first person to criticize the government. How do we move forward with that? And the duty so done will expand your rights. It is when you have lived your life well and served your country well by performing your duty, you would see that it expands your rights. It gives you a better horizon. Together we can make it work. There's no one cap fits all, but we can all make our effort. We can all contribute our quota by doing what? Think more of your duties. That must be achieved. And the duty so done will expand your rights. Happy Founders Day to all our cherished listeners. Happy Founders Day to our amazing people who joined us online. I say special thank you to our board chair, Professor Michael Kwe, the right Honorable Professor Okwe, who was the former speaker, is also the board chair for Dankwa Institute. We thank him especially for joining us. We thank all our honorable members of parliament who joined us. We thank you, distinguished guests. We thank you especially Tesconites and our youth, and all who have logged on and have listened to us. Time is fast spent. Above all things, we thank Professor Ose Asibe for this amazing enlightening lecture. We look forward to more lectures. Probably we invite you again to join us.
Yes.
We look forward to more lectures. We look forward to all of you joining us, whether COVID allows us to do it as an open event or we do it online.
Yeah.
We hope we provide you with more information. Thank you very much and have an amazing Founders Day.
Happy Founders Day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. So